Hello and welcome to Perfectly Paranormal, episode 31. My name's Annaschmidt, and I'm here every week to share with you true paranormal encounters and information about devils, demons and dark energy beings that no one else talks about. And today we're exploring how spirits and paranormal beings use electronic manipulation to communicate with us. We don't always choose to communicate with spirits and paranormal beings, but quite often these ethereal entities will use our communication devices to listen or let us know that they're watching or use them to interact with us. And in our first story, I share a late night experience with my car radio from back in 2018 that I have called the radio receiver. Now, early in May 2018, I was driving home after midnight when I was working as a paranormal tour guide, and I had a rather unusual experience with my car radio. Now, spirits at the tour location loved me because I often talked to them like friends, and I shared jokes, and I just enjoyed being around them basically. And this particular night, someone hitchhiked a ride home with me. Now, I was listening to my favourite radio station when suddenly the radio went dead for 4 seconds and then came back on again. Now, this happened 3 times in a row as I was thinking about the tour that night, the guests and their interactions with the spirits who came to say hello. Now, thinking that this was just some random occurrence, I just ignored it until I was remembering a particular interaction with a teenage boy spirit who we shall call Josh. Now, Josh was a lovely spirit who had been at this particular location for decades, and he loved giving great big bear hugs to some of our tour guests who found this random invisible hugger to be quite shocking. I would explain to them that Josh was quite harmless, but he just loved people so much and saying hello, and he didn't really understand personal boundaries. So bear hugs were his big greeting to many astonished guests on these tours. Now, Josh didn't know exactly how old he was, but when I saw him in my mind's eye, he looked around about the age of 14 to 15, and he had the biggest smile from ear to ear. And he told me that he was at that location because he was defective. Now, this is a rather inappropriate term that was used by staff when he was alive in around about the 1940s. Now, I felt quite sad for him being talked about that way, and I explained to him that he wasn't defective, but he had a condition which we now call Down syndrome. And in the 1940s, people didn't understand why children would look or behave in different ways, so they labelled them with inappropriate words. And this explanation helped him to understand why he looked different to others around him and why he sometimes behaved in a different way. Now, Josh loved using devices to communicate, along with his well-known bear hugs, or big cuddles, as he lovingly called them. And on the tours, he would trigger REM pods, the flashing light bulbs with many colours, and now I knew that he could manipulate my car radio. Now, Josh stayed with me until I pulled into my driveway, and as I parked and turned off my car, I turned to Josh, who was sitting quite happily in the front passenger seat, and I thanked him for his company, but I said that it was now time for him to go home. Now, I don't do those paranormal tours anymore, But I do sincerely hope that Josh is still enjoying his communication with the tour guests and giving them those great big bear hugs. And I felt a little bit sad when I was writing the notes for this episode, until I saw Josh's big smiling face. His face just popped into my third eye. This tells you how they're always listening. They're always picking up on the vibrations that we are putting out. He gave me this rather excited thumbs up and blew me a lovely kiss. What a gorgeous, gentle soul, spreading his own form of love and happiness. Now for our second story. This would have to be one of my most memorable communications with a spirit. It is a rather cool tale of a convict worker still doing his time in spirit form at a local haunted location here in southern Tasmania. Now, I've called this experience the Convict Communicator. Now, I'm a paranormal addict, as I've confessed many times, and paranormal investigation equipment kind of sends me into a new level of supernatural attention and otherworldly enthusiasm. Well into the night, and usually the wee hours of the morning as well. And over a 12-month period starting in late 2018. By mere chance, or was it, that I had the opportunity to chat with a man who had died in the late 1800s. I acquired myself an SB7 spirit box, which is a small radio wave receiver that spirits can use to communicate through using the static noise produced when the radio is running either forwards or backwards through the channels. I prefer to run the spirit box backwards through the channels, and then I know that I can't possibly be picking up a human voice through the radio. Now, I acquired the spirit box when I was working as a paranormal tour guide at a well-known local paranormal site just outside Hobart. And I would practice using the spirit box at home so that I could confidently explain to our tour guests how to use the device on the night. And often the intention to connect with local spirits always brought someone or a group of someones into my home to say hello. Well, on this particular occasion one afternoon, I had a very strong male voice come through, loud and clear. And he was so eager to chat, and we spent many afternoons talking about his life at the location where he resided. He said he'd been there for a very long time. He couldn't give me the exact date. When you're in spirit form, they don't work off time. They don't always remember the dates from when they are alive. And he was still at this site, working as a porter, ferrying residents around the site. And he said it was a hard life. There was little food and there was cold rooms to sleep in, but it was somewhere to live. Now, the way he communicated this told me that he was still on duty in death as he was in life, still enjoying his work to some degree. I do wonder, though, if he realised that there was the opportunity to transition into the afterlife. He never asked me, and I never offered it to him. I just felt that it wasn't appropriate. If he wanted to transition, then he would have asked me himself. Now, one morning I sat down to see if he was available to have a conversation. And as I turned on the spirit box, I got a very loud, annoyed woman's voice that said, "He's working." I just sat there stunned. I hadn't even asked if he was available for a communication, available to have a chat. I will never forget it. I just didn't know what to say. Now, this woman's voice, she may have been a staff member, a little bit disgruntled that I was keeping him away from his duties. Because spirits, like I mentioned before, who are very connected to their jobs in life, sometimes choose to diligently go about their work in spirit. Now, I rationalise this for a few reasons. They enjoy the work and they felt that they still had a purpose. Or they don't know that they've died and they're just going about their work, just going about their routine, and they see the now abandoned site as alive and busy and lots of residents and lots of staff members. You know, the buildings, the gardens, they just see it all as it was when he was there back in the 1800s. And sometimes they don't think that there's any other option, or maybe that they're not worthy of entering into the afterlife. Now, the other funny thing about using the spirit box, sometimes I'd sit down and I didn't really have an intention to talk to that particular man, but I would just turn it on and listen. And quite often there would be multiple conversations going on, and I felt like I was eavesdropping. They were just random little conversations. Sometimes you wouldn't get the full sentence or the full idea of what they were talking about, but you could hear a male voice, a female voice, a child's voice. You could hear all these different people communicating with each other, which is really nice because it makes me think that they're around other people. And then at some level, they're actually happy. They're not alone. They're not abandoned. They're not living in spirit form, wandering the earth in total loneliness and desperation. Now, our third story is a bit of a mixture of communications with various spirits, sprites, and things that go bump in the night. And I've called this encounter, or encounters, Are You Watching, Listening, and Paying Attention? Now, there was an elderly gentleman that I mentioned in episode 20. He didn't know that he died, and he wondered why there was a young mum and 2 toddlers living in his home. Now, he would quite often, this is so funny, he would get their attention by turning on the TV in the middle of the night and the kids' electronic toys, which totally freaked out the mum. And in the same episode, there was an auntie who wanted to let her niece know that she was okay. And she would turn the plate in the microwave in her niece's home. And the microwave wasn't turned on. And the niece would simply be sitting in her lounge room reading a book. She could hear this grinding, whirring sound. And she'd go to the kitchen and she'd be totally astonished to see the plate in the microwave going round all by itself. So if you want to hear that full episode about the elderly gentleman and the microwave operating auntie, you can tune into episode 20. Now, spirits in my home sometimes use the lights as communication devices. I found that they like to use 1 flicker for yes and 2 flickers for no. And often they'll read my thoughts, or they'll want to help write the notes for this podcast as I'm working late at night sometimes. And they'll flicker or blacken my laptop screen to let me know that they're there. And I'll have to include them. I have to ask them questions. I have to not necessarily get their advice, but I often just want to be acknowledged, and I'm more than happy to acknowledge them. This was funny. One night, I was sitting on my couch watching the TV, had my laptop on my lap as you do, and something or someone ran through my laptop screen from left to right and then disappeared off up into the hallway again. And it totally distracted me and made me laugh. It looked like, how can I explain it? It was like a little being with a tall pointy hat on. And as this being ran, the top of the hat kind of wobbled from side to side. Maybe it had a bell on the top. I didn't see it for that long enough, but I saw this little energy being out of the corner of my eye, and often I'll ignore them. If I'm busy, I'll ignore them because I'm just trying to get something done. Spirits can be quite demanding. Demonic beings, dark and demonic beings can be quite demanding sometimes. They have no patience. None of them do. So you have to lay the ground rules down. So I ignored this being and I just saw it run around my lounge room, and I'm looking at my laptop. It literally ran through the screen, left to right. And there was this black bar that followed it. This is a fairly new laptop, so I know that it is not an issue with the technology. And then there was another time. I have so many experiences to share with you. Some of them long, some of them quite short, but they're all usually got some sort of quirky level of humour attracted to them. So this time there was a young girl spirit with pigtails and a very cheeky smile. She used to live in our house. And quite often when I was in bed reading a book, she would run in the doorway, jump on the bed, bounce across my lap as I'm trying to read my book, and then disappear around the bed and out the door again. Now, I don't know if she did this to annoy me or whether she was just playing, because the house that I'm living in now was actually a family daycare centre. So whether this little girl came with a family, whether something happened to her in this house, I never ever found that out. She's not here now. A friend helped me cross her over into the afterlife in my early days of doing this work, because this little girl was a little bit naughty and she would get one of my kids into trouble sometimes. So when I had a conversation with her, she would quite often stick her tongue out and run off. And I'm like, right, it's time for you to move on, young lassie. I've had enough of you causing mischief in my house. Now, there was the dark energy being. I've got all these stories about dark energy beings as well. There is so much that goes on around us that most of us don't see. People just aren't tuned into it, but I'm afraid I am, so you're going to get lots and lots and lots of these little funny stories. So there was this dark energy being who appeared when I was quietly getting ready for bed one night. You know, as you do, you're snuggling down into bed with the lights turned off. And as I shut my eyes, I instantly saw a pair of very defined red eyes in my mind. So when I talk about seeing things in my mind, sometimes it's like a movie. Sometimes it's a flash of colour, or I might sort of get a flash of like that little girl running across my knee, bouncing across my knee and then running around the bed. Sometimes these visions last longer. Now, these red eyes were very defined. They weren't menacing. They weren't angry. There wasn't any emotion that I could pick up that was attached to these eyes. They were just there. So I just observed them. So I've quite often learnt when things like this appear is that they want your attention. So you observe them until they are ready to communicate with you. Now, as I looked at these eyes, there was no face, just the eyes, no outline, no body outline, nothing. Just this pair of red eyes. Now, they weren't like our eyes, like I'm seeing them now. It was simply a red circle with like a black slit down the middle, a little bit like cat's eyes, if you need something to compare it to. Now, I'm trying to get to sleep. I'm tired. I've had a really, really busy day, and I just attempted to change my mind's focus to something else. But nope. These red eyes continued to stare, and now even more intensely. Like there was no voice that came with these eyes, just a pair of red, staring eyes. Now, I sat up feeling somewhat slightly annoyed and slightly uncomfortable, like these eyes wanted something, but what? I wasn't hearing words. I wasn't seeing words, which is sometimes how they communicate. So I thought, how am I going to communicate with this pair of red eyes? So I just stared back. I just stared at these eyes, and I can't tell you how long I stared at them for. Time just disappears when you're doing these things. And in my head, I heard myself say, "Can I help you?" Now, the eyes very slowly closed once and then opened again. And I thought, here is a communication method. Now, I then asked another question and I said, "Are you here to hurt me?" The eyes closed and opened twice. So it looks like once for yes, twice for no. And I asked a few other questions just to gauge that sense of, is it yes, is it no? Because sometimes it's hard to work out how these beings want to communicate with you. There's no book on this. They're all different. They all do it in their own way. Now, this 1 yes and 2 no is a pretty standard response that I've seen spirits use, and I couldn't see why it wasn't the same with dark energy beings. Now, I wasn't getting the usual dizziness, brain fog, headache, sort of feeling sick in the stomach like I do with some dark energy beings that may have ill intentions, or they're a bit annoyed, or they feel like they're being evicted from the home that I'm cleansing, or the person. This lower vibrational being was so patient. So patient with this human who was just faffing about, just not giving it what it wanted. So I calmed down, settled myself, and I just had this brief conversation with these flickering eyes. And this red-eyed energy being wanted to transition into the healing space, which is a place in the afterlife waiting room, which is put aside for all lower vibrational energy beings. Now, they can't shoot off into the afterlife like our soul energy does when it leaves our bodies. They've got to do some work first, but they're given this option, and by free will, they can choose to go to what I call the healing space. They may call it something else. It may not even have a name. But you've got your Legion Generals there at the threshold. And I'm going to talk about Legion General demonic level beings another time in another episode. Now let's look at some information about these paranormal beings. I may even find another story that pops into my head as I'm talking. That's quite often how it happens. Because I've had so many experiences, is that sometimes they're just intermingled with my daily life. It's really quite funny. I've been living this paranormal life pretty much for my whole 55 years of living. Anyway, let's not get sidetracked. So paranormal beings have long been believed to possess the ability to manipulate electronic devices. So this is spirits, which are once in human bodies. Paranormal beings also includes elemental beings. I just group them all under the paranormal realm. Then you've got your different levels of dark and demonic beings. So whether they're ghosts, spirits, dark entities from different dimensions, they all seem to have this mysterious connection with technology that defies conventional understanding. Now, there's many reports of electronic disturbances and unexplained phenomena that suggest that paranormal beings can influence and interact with large and small electronic devices in various ways. Now, I think this is attributed to the level of power or the level of energy that each different type of energy being has. So spirits may not have the same level of ability for energetic disturbance as, say, the demonic level beings. They make me feel quite sick. Spirits don't make me feel unwell at all. Demonic level beings, because they're such a low vibration and they're very dense in their energy, they carry more power in a sense of being able to affect us. So do they carry more power to be able to manipulate electronic devices? Mind you, don't think they have the level of ability to manipulate devices for what we would call long periods of time. It's a short burst of energy so that we can see that they're there. You know, the flashes, the flickers, the knocks, the mugs that get knocked on the floor, the running through the laptops, that sort of thing. It's sort of between 2 and 5 seconds is how I rationalise it. I experienced the manipulation of lights. School one day, this is another little story coming to mind. Our fluorescent lights at school where I used to work were on the walls. They weren't in the ceiling. So they were about head height. I'm about 6'2". So they were about my head height. And as I would walk past these fluorescent lights sometimes, they would flicker like crazy. And then someone else would walk past them, there'd be nothing. Now, I took this as a sign of any paranormal beings in the building just acknowledging that they're seeing me. And I just in my head have a little giggle. Now, this quite often freaked out some of the teachers who were walking beside me, or a lot of the staff, I'm sure, thought I was a little bit off the deep end. Here are some other devices that don't escape invisible interaction. These are the electronics kids' toys, torches, mobile phones, TVs, radios, old-fashioned record players, computers, paranormal investigation equipment, car radios, and car lights. I've actually had paranormal beings flicker my car lights. They had the car serviced. I had the bulbs changed. There's nothing wrong with them. But yet they're flickering my car lights because they know they can get my attention. Now, witnesses have often reported incidences where their devices suddenly turn on and off, change channels, change stations, or they exhibit erratic behaviour without any logical explanation. Don't you love it? I think spirits, dark and demonic beings especially, will love to play with us. We're like playthings to them because they know that most people are frightened of them. So they flicker a few lights, they turn on the radio, they knock a mug on the floor, and then people go into massive amounts of paranoia and fear, and they're running around in drama. And these beings just sit back and they just suck up all that energy that's being created. Because you've got to remember, energy beings, they need an energetic food source. Now, any of those paranormal investigation people out there that are listening to this will love EVPs. EVPs are fascinating. Now, paranormal beings are often associated with the phenomenon of electronic voice phenomena, or I call it electronic voice projection. Now, EVPs refer to the capture of disembodied voices or sounds on audio recording devices. Now, this can be a specific device, like a digital recorder. I actually went out and bought a specific one, and then I realised that I could record voices on my phone. So you can use either. You don't always have to go and buy the expensive equipment. Now, often these sounds or these voices or the singing or the interactions are often inaudible to the human ear during the time of recording. These mysterious voices, believed to originate from the spirit world, they can often be heard quite clearly in playback, suggesting that paranormal entities can leave their voice imprint on electronic media. Another story for you. It was at a little cemetery in this town where I used to do the paranormal tours. A lot of the people who were at that particular location were buried in this very old cemetery. And I was there in the middle of the day. Like, this is a tiny cemetery in the middle of a town. Like, you wouldn't even know it was there. You've got big shops all around it. You've got a small arterial road. You've got residences on either side. I asked permission to walk in. I let them know why I am there. I would like to offer them a hello. I'm here to visit. I would like to use some of my paranormal equipment, especially my audio recorder, my EVP recorder. And what I did was I just sat on the seat. And I just sat there. I actually had two devices, my little $100 audio recorder that I bought, but I also had my phone turned on. Quite often it's important to have multiple recording areas because one might pick up something that the other doesn't. Now, I sat there for maybe 10 minutes and I asked any spirits that were present if they would like to come and say hello. I said, "Hi, my name's Anna. It's lovely to meet you. I know that a lot of you are present from this particular site, and I'm here to acknowledge you and just to say hello." Well, when I got home, and this was so lovely, when I was listening back through the recording, I could hear my voice. Oh my gosh, I could hear my voice a lot more than anything else. And as I'm sitting there, I had to turn the volume up a lot because I have tinnitus. So trying to hear voices through my ringing in my ears is a little bit tricky. But as I'm listening, I heard this very, very quiet voice singing, "Richard." Wow. And I rewound the recording and I went, I think that was a voice. And as I listened to it again, I heard, "Richard." Oh my goodness. I sent it off to a friend to get her to listen to it. She doesn't have tinnitus. And she said, yep, there's Richard and there's also this, and this. There was all these other little words or phrases because I would ask questions. Then I would leave a gap of about 20 seconds. Then I would ask another question. You've got to give spirits time to build up their energy to then put it into a physical device so that we can hear them back. So that was really quite exciting, and I've never forgot Richard singing his name. It was just so beautiful. So along with manipulating physical electronic devices, paranormal beings are also believed to affect digital technology. Now, it's not uncommon for people to report strange glitches, anomalies or malfunctions in their digital devices in the presence of paranormal activity. Now, quite often when we used to do the ghost tours, sometimes the batteries would go flat in our paranormal investigation equipment. Now, the person that ran these tours was very diligent about putting in fresh batteries every time we went, so we knew that they were new. But nope, half an hour, 2 hours, flat batteries. So paranormal beings somehow absorb that battery energy. Now, photos and videos may exhibit unexplained distortions or apparitions or even be deleted. Now, this brings to mind a time when a friend of mine who was helping me edit my second book called The Darkness Around Us. This is a handbook to help people understand the paranormal beings that are around us, why they're here, what they're up to, how they communicate with us, the signs and symptoms, the attachment methods. It's written in an educational mindset, not a fear-based one. So if you're interested, you'll find it on Amazon. I'll leave a link in the description box. Now, computers can freeze or crash sometimes. Now, when I was writing that book, I would be saving, putting all the files onto external hard drives, just in case my computer crashed and it was just unsalvageable. Now, you're going to love this little story, talking about computers that may freeze or crash inexplicably, or the files may be corrupted. Within the 12-month warranty period of the laptop that I'm looking at right now, it literally went up in a puff of smoke. I had the cord plugged in and it was charging. I had sparks and smoke flying out of the charging port. So as you do, you turn it off. You sit there and you just go, well, what am I going to do now? I was in a little bit of a mild panic because this is my work device. This is what I work on. Now, when I went to touch my computer, on the right-hand side, it was cool, it was cold. On the front left-hand side, it was very, very hot. Now, I found out later that that is where the battery is stored. Now, because it was within warranty, the laptop went back to the manufacturer. Now, you're going to love this. It's really quite funny. They could find nothing wrong with it. And the computer man came back to me and he went, look, I think it's you, not the computer. What did you do to your laptop? I said, I did nothing. It wasn't sitting in the sun. I was in a room with the curtains closed. I'm always very aware of protecting electronic devices from sunlight, overheating. It was in the middle of summer. So I'd done all the debunking. I don't know what caused that, but I'm putting it down to a paranormal cause, unless it was a faulty battery. But I've had laptops for years. I mean, I've got one in the cupboard that was my father's that's over 10 years old. Still works fine. But I'm very aware now if anything happens to my devices. I keep multiple copies of everything on 2 different external hard drives, just in case. Now, despite numerous accounts and unscientific evidence, as I've just given you, the true nature and mechanics behind how paranormal beings manipulate electronic devices still remains largely unknown. Some theories suggest that these beings draw upon their energy or our energy or the spiritual essence that is in the environment to interact with electromagnetic fields generated by technology. Now, others propose that their influence stems from their ability to manipulate the human mind, influencing the perception and behaviours of individuals interacting with these electronic devices. Whatever the explanation, the connection between paranormal entities and electronic manipulation continues to captivate and perplex those intrigued by unexplained occurrences. So in episode 32, I'm talking possession. Yes, you've heard me right. And not the head-spinning, vomiting nail scenes that you see in the movies, but possession in reality. And how demonic beings en masse can manipulate people, triggering their deeply hidden negative behaviours and their mental states. And how I help clients with the removal of these detrimental manipulators and assist clients to return to their normal state of being, along with medical and mental health care. You'd be surprised how many people are getting around in their lives with spirits, dark or demonic level beings present within themselves through the trauma that they've gone through in their lives, through their addictions, through their behaviours. There are signs, there are specific things that you will notice within someone that can be a sudden erratic change, or it can be a slow change over time, depending on their life traumas, the dramas that have happened in their lives, what their mental and emotional state is like. So join me for episode 32 if you want to hear about what I see as possession in some of my clients. You're going to find it really interesting. So thank you for joining me today. And don't forget, if you want to share a paranormal experience just with myself, or you would like me to share one of your experiences through my podcast, you can do a voice recording, or you can write out your experience and I will read it exactly as you have written. Email me at spiritualbeing44@gmail.com. And for information on paranormal house clearing, you can visit my website, Spiritual Being. You will find the address in the description box. And I look forward to sharing this spooky space again with you next week. And remember, life is perfectly paranormal.